Hello there, valued viewers and valued students. Welcome to the second installation of our video flight combat program. Keep in mind there will be lectures on certain topics that are stated in these videos and that we will cover in these videos, and it is imperative that you come to those lectures. However, this video today, as promised, will be the second installation of our video series, and we'll be talking about aircraft systems. Among all the videos you will watch, this will be one of the most important. We cannot control when Volatus comes out, and therefore we cannot control when you guys will get your F-15C Hornets. It is common knowledge that we will be transitioning to the Hornets once Volatus is released. However, it is imperative that you get to know the systems of this current aircraft, since this current aircraft uses essentially the system that Volatus is based off of, and Volatus is essentially just a slight modification to this system. So it is imperative that you get to know the systems in this aircraft and learn to fly it. Should you learn to fly it, you will be the best and most prepared when it comes to transitioning to your F-18 Hornet. So without further ado, let's get to the video. Now, upon spawning in, under the belly of the aircraft, this compartment will be open by default, like this. This is where you rearm your 20mm cannon. Now keep in mind it will be open on default when spawning, so you should close it before flight. This small compartment here is for fuel. You can also attach weapons like bombs, missiles, and fuel tanks to the pylons under the aircraft. You can do this by selecting the attach tool you have at spawn, clicking on said item, and clicking on said pylon. Very simple. Please do note that not all pylons can carry everything. Example, these 9X racks cannot carry a fuel tank. However, the center pylon can. Now, without further ado, let's get to probably the most important part, your aircraft and your aircraft systems. Upon hopping in your jet in the front seat, you will be automatically in third person mode. You will have to click on the ladder to get rid of it, and press X to go into first person. When you're in first person, by default, you will be zoomed in all the way like this. It is going to be up to you to zoom all the way out to get the best range of motion and field of view. You may then hold right click in the cockpit while moving your mouse to look around. Looking around while flying is something you are going to have to get used to over time. It is a skill that is built up with time and dedication. It took me quite a while to be good at doing that. It is recommended that in your beginning stages of flying, you switch between flying in first person and third person, as both are going to be imperative and both will help you get better. Now that you're in the cockpit, let's see what we can do. If you press C, you can close the canopy. Now, immediately upon entering the cockpit, there are going to be a few functioning displays that you will see. There's this one to the left. This is your left MFD, your bottom center MFD, and your top right MFD. Among these three MFDs, you will also have the heads-up display. We will refer to this as the HUD. This is an important definition to remember for later videos. You will also have these three lights here. These are your HUD modes. Essentially, this is your flight control computer system. This will control the interface that you see on the HUD. So, let's start up the jet for starters. There's no startup sequence in this jet. There will be one for the Hornet, so you don't have to worry about learning one right away. To start up, simply hold E for around 10 seconds. While we wait for that to happen, which you'll hear the engines be able to start up. While we wait for that to happen, let's talk about some of the displays we've seen in this cockpit. Number one, it is important to note that this HUD has parallax, which essentially means if you're not perfectly aligned with the HUD, you're not going to always be able to see everything on it. Let's talk about the HUD first, since this is among the most important things. I am also now letting go of E because the engines have finished starting up. On the top of the HUD, you have your bearing. This is a generally small number. It's going to be quite difficult to see. So we don't often use bearing to call things out. We speak in clocks for now. On your right, you're going to have your altitude. On the left, you're going to have your speed. As you can see there, speed, altitude. The small number to the left of your, the left under your speed, is your angle of attack indicator. If you watched our previous video on physics flight, you'll know what that is. And it'll be very important for later videos. The circle that you see in the center of your screen is your flight path indicator. That tells you your direction of travel, your actual direction of travel. And this W that you see here is your nose position. It will tell you where your nose is pointed. This hard to see line here that goes right across the center of the screen is the horizon line. That will always be on the horizon, no matter your orientation. And these other tick marks represent degrees. Negative degrees, positive degrees. Each one is around 5 degrees. Okay, now for the tricky parts. Here you have two things on the bottom right of your HUD. These are among the most important things on your HUD. This first sequence of letters, it says nav. The second sequence of letters also says nav. Now, this first sequence of letters tells you your HUD mode. The second sequence of letters tells you your HUD sub-mode. So mode within the bigger mode. Right now we are in nav. If we look down on our flight control computer, we can see it also has red for nav. In navigation mode, you will have this interface, the basic navigational interfaces. If you hit M, your mode will change to ILS mode. We will talk about this in a later video and how to use it. However, this is basically the system you will use to land properly. There will be extra symbology that pops up on your HUD. We simply don't have it at this very moment because we are not lined up with the runway. If you hit Control M, you can change your HUD sub-mode. Now, for the time being, there is a slight bug with the main HUD mode changing. Here we can see we are in AA, which is air-to-air mode, and we are in the EEGS gun sight. When you're in the air, we will talk about how to use this gun sight, and we're going to talk about exactly how it works in a later video. However, for now, this is the way you will be aiming your main gun. If you hit M, you will go to the MSRM sub-mode, which is essentially another version of the nav mode. However, it's in the air-to-air section, so it saves you time from having to hit Control M to switch to your gun by just having now to hit M. Ideally, if you're in a combat scenario and you're not exactly gunning anyone, you should be in air-to-air mode in MSRM. That way, in case you do need to switch to your gun, it's as simple as pressing M and not Control M. For the air-to-ground mode, this was temporarily removed from the game. So, in the air-to-ground mode, it's essentially the same as nav and we won't be using it much. Now we are back to nav. That's about all there is to the HUD. This left MFD, there's only one functionality to it as of now. These will display weapons in the future. However, because the game is still under development, and the system is under development, and undergoing heavy changes all the time, right now this only displays the number of rounds you have left in your 20mm cannon. Here, I'll fire it now. To fire the cannon, it is T. As you can see, our rounds went down. This center is the radar here. We will talk about how this works in a later video. In fact, the videos that we'll be talking about the systems themselves will be in the video right after this. Essentially what the radar will do, however, is tell you where enemy aircraft are. Think of it as echolocation. It sends out a signal, it gets one back. It tells you the direction of an opponent aircraft. And this on your right is also among one of the important things. Besides your radar, it is your RWR, or your radar warning receiver. Again, we will talk about how this works in a later video. However, for now, just know that this is going to be kind of what keeps you safe and keeps you situationally aware. Okay, so that's the basics of the cockpit. Now let's get on to actually flying. Remember that X can switch you from first to third person mode, and now we're going to go over some basic controls. F is flaps. As of current, flaps do not have much of a function. H and J can turn on your anti-collision lights and your ground lights, also known as your taxi lights. As we saw earlier, T is for guns, Q is for flare, I'll show you that in a minute, and W and S control your throttle. Let's taxi over to the runway. A and D, while on the ground, is your nose wheel steering, as you can see there. However, in the air, A and D also acts as your rudder. For now, we will taxi to the taxiway and take off using the taxiway for ease of use and for the sake of making the video shorter. This is not proper procedure. So, if we hold W and push our throttle past its limit, we will engage the afterburners. Now for flying. Let's get in the air first before we talk about some of the controls. Now that we're in the air, we're going to hit G to raise the gear. We'll level off, and we'll let go of W to cut the burners. We are still in full throttle. We'll align with our horizon line. Now let's talk about some of the controls. Now, you're going to see my mouse move around my screen a lot. That is because the mouse is the way you control the aircraft in flight. See, the mouse is essentially the position of the flight stick. Wherever it is on the mouse is the position of the stick. However, it is not inverted. So up is actually up, and down is actually down. So, the higher I put my stick up, I will pull up. The lower I put my stick on my screen, the lower my aircraft nose will drop. Left is roll left, right is roll right. So, let's do a couple of turns. Also, the amount of G's you will pull and how hard you will pull will be determined on how far up or down your mouse is. So as you can see right now, I'm not pulling that hard, but if I put my mouse all the way up, I will be pulling much harder. As we talked about earlier, Q is flares. I'll show you that now. And again, right click and holding while moving your mouse allows you to rotate your screen. You can do so while turning. Please take note that you cannot control the aircraft momentarily while you are holding right click. Rather, your mouse will stay in the same position as it was last. A handy tool is R. By pressing R, it will automatically recenter your screen and zoom in on the HUD. If I was facing to my left and was unable to find my mouse for whatever reason, I could simply press R, and it would face me back to the forward cockpit, zoomed in on the HUD. Let's switch modes real quick. Let's go to air and show you what the gun sight will look like. Again, we will talk about how this works and how to use in another video, but that's the gun sight for you. Same for MSRM. It looks exactly the same as nav. Alright. Let's take a look at ILS real quick. We'll just get aligned with the runway. We won't actually land for this video. We'll only get aligned, and we'll show you what it looks like from there. Let's switch to our nav mode and hit ILS, and as you can see, we now have some different HUD symbology. There it is. Again, we will be showing you how to use this in a later video. Alright, that's going to be it for the basic controls of the system and the basic controls of flight. I look forward to teaching you in the next video about the aircraft systems, how to use the different modes, ILS and gun sight, and then after that, we'll be going into straight definitions and then dogfighting, which is where the fun stuff happens. Alright, I hope you learned something from this video, and I hope this is of some use to you guys who are kind of new to the system. Thank you very much for listening and taking your time. I shall see you in the next one.